An increasing number of high-profile Republicans are now clamoring for New Jersey Governor Chris Christie to join the 2012 fray. They want him to rescue the GOP from what is widely viewed as a lackluster and flawed field of potential challengers to President Obama. That includes the people who are talking to him: former President George W. Bush, we hear, former First Lady Nancy Reagan, and just today, New York's former Governor George Pataki, who was considering a run himself not so very long ago. He released this statement this morning. America is in a crisis, and none of the current candidates or the president has leveled with the American public about what needs to be done to rescue our future. This country needs a straight shooter and a proven leader. I urge Governor Chris Christie to run for president to fill the void and lead America forward. Fascinating. But can a moderate like Christie succeed in today's Tea Party-influenced national GOP? Joining me now to talk more about this is someone who knows a good deal about Republican politics. He is John Faso, the former Assembly Minority Leader and 2006 candidate for governor. Nice to see you, John.
Nice to be with you.
So what do you make of all of this clamoring for Chris Christie? He's like the great savior.
Well,
today.
there's always a desire for the new flavor, something new.
Right.
I heard someone say the other day that the most popular candidate is one who hasn't yet announced, but as soon as they announce, then people start finding reasons why that person isn't perhaps as good as they thought. I think that's it's the shiny new toy phenomenon, perhaps. But I do think if Governor Christie gets in, he would be a formidable candidate. There's no doubt.
You think so? No, it's interesting. He's doing what candidates do, which is to say perpetuating the myth as long as possible, right? Because you're right. As long as you're in flirtation mode, everyone loves you. As soon as you get in, they start looking at your record, they start looking at your personal life, they start looking at all sorts of things. You become fair game for everyone else to tear down. Right now, what is Mitt Romney going to say? Attack Chris Christie? I mean, he's nobody right now. He's just the governor of the Garden State. That's all.
Well, I think Romney is actually in a very strong position because he's had a lot of in every single poll that comes out of Republicans and also independents. I've seen polling that suggests that he fits the bill in terms of what people see in terms of acting presidential, handling himself in terms of demeanor.
Right.
He's gone through 3 debates. I think he frankly has not been. He's come through those pretty much unscathed. So, but should Governor Christie get in? Only he can answer that question. Will he get in? Again, only he can answer that question. There's no doubt that there's a lot of Republican supporters and money supporters on the sidelines right now waiting to see. It's not too late for him to get in, but soon it will be too late.
Right, because there are deadlines at the end of October that you have to file in certain, not necessarily key, I think Utah might be the first, where you have to file paperwork saying that you're actually going to be a candidate and compete there.
I think between Romney and Huntsman, they've got Utah cornered.
Right, well, let's talk about that. The other state, if I'm not mistaken, is Florida. I think that you have to file paperwork there. Obviously, you need to compete in Florida. And they might be moving their primary up, which would be obviously extra problematic for everyone, but that's a topic for another day. Utah, I mean, that's the Mormon problem. I mean, you really think that people are ready for a Mormon president?
I don't think it matters.
You don't?
No, I don't. I think that we're it's a different paradigm now, and while these things will matter to some people, and either for or against, I think at the end of the day they become a wash. I don't think that it's now if someone was wanting to run for president and they were part of some kind of cultist society, some Jim Jones type thing, I think that would be a problem. But
right.
I don't think any of the candidates have any impediment in that regard.
Yeah, but the problem with, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, but I don't think that a lot of people know all the details of what it means to be a Mormon. I think they have these ideas. Well, at one point polygamy was okay. At one point it's a dry culture, that they don't drink any caffeine. They don't. I mean, they might know a lot of things that they consider not mainstream and maybe even a little weird.
I don't think that at the end of the day these things are going to matter, and I don't think. I think the country is well beyond that, and from 1960 on, I think that the country has proven that these kind of things mean less and less.
Let's talk then about a person's politics. I mean, you're talking right now about a party that is very divided internally, and not to say that the Democrats are not, but the focus right now is the GOP, some incredibly conservative folks who are really driving the train. And you just see what's happening in Washington, where they reject spending bill after spending bill. And you know, Chris Christie is a moderate guy.
You know, I don't agree with your formulation. The Republican Party has always had social conservatives, it's had fiscal conservatives, it's had people who believe in a strong defense. And those really are the three pillars, I would say, of the party. You'll go different degrees and gradations within that, but that really is the Republican tent. And the question always is, it's the Bill Buckley formulation, if you will, who is the most conservative candidate who can get elected in November? That's really the key, I think, that the Republican nominating process is intended to winnow out.
Right.
And so you mentioned the House Republicans. Well, the House Republicans at least have passed spending bills. You know, the Senate Democrats in the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, the whole lot of them, they haven't even passed a budget within the Senate Democrats in over 2 years.
Okay.
So I don't really accept your formulation. I think that the fact of the matter is that the change in the House of Representatives and a big leap in Republican ascendancy both in the U.S. Senate and in state legislatures around the country, and even here in New York, where Republicans had fairly significant gains in November of 2010, was based in large part upon the public being petrified that we're about to turn this country into the next Greece.
But do you believe that Chris Christie, who's actually dealing with the Democratic legislature, if I'm not mistaken, would be any more successful in dealing with an incredibly divided and recalcitrant Congress? That is to say, we don't know what the makeup will be. They're changing the lines, and we don't know who's going to own what when it comes to 2012, assuming all things remain much as they are now. Would he be any more successful than President Obama has been?
Well, I think that you know, the same question probably could have been asked a year ago in New York, and I think Governor Cuomo, whether you support him or not, has proven that he can bring people together and forcefully inject himself into the process, successfully court people on both ends of the political spectrum, and get an agenda done. And similarly, I think it's possible to do in Washington. But I think also the media and perhaps many of the public dwell on this fact that, well, they can't get things done, they argue, they bicker, they go back and forth. Well, this is the process. This is the system we have. The founders created a system which had divided power between the branches.
Yeah, okay.
No,
but do you think the founders would have created the system the way it is if they knew that every 6 months or so we were going to have, or less, we were going to have a near stalemate about shutting down the government because we couldn't decide if FEMA should get refunded? The founders
were exposed to a political system, a parliamentary system.
True.
Okay? Where if you have a majority, bingo, you can pass anything you want. That's what they have in England. That's what they have in a parliamentary system around the country. They deliberately chose not to do that. They chose to set up a system whereby you have the House and the Senate elected in a different way, different terms, and they did not set up a system that would allow itself to have easy, quick decisions. And let's face it, the divisions in Congress simply reflect the divisions among the public.
True.
And so, really, this is what I, kind of go off on distraction about is this notion that somehow this should be simple and easy. Well, the issues are not simple and easy. There are some solutions that I think are the right ones, but there are people on the other side that have very diametrically opposed, and right now in the Congress, basically, they match each other 50-50.
You know, you said something earlier about Mitt Romney and sort of fitting the presidential mold, if you will, the way... It's interesting to me because Chris Christie doesn't fit the mold at all. You're talking about a plain-spoken guy who, you talk about people, politicians should be people who recommend things to you, consultants, right? You should look a certain way and you should sound a certain way and you should wear a certain thing and you should never say these things and you shouldn't anger this group and you shouldn't anger that group.
They tell that to TV anchors, too.
They do. It has not worked with me so far, but you should see my email. But, however... Chris Christie, he's overweight. I mean, look, there's no two ways about it. He's very plain-spoken. He's picked fights with all sorts of people, and he doesn't seem to care. Maybe that appeals to voters. I mean, well, it's a breath of fresh air.
It is, but once you get into the presidential sweepstakes, as Rick Perry has, I think, seen, it becomes a very different game. And the Republican Party, and this is maybe a virtue or maybe a fault depending on your perspective, but with very rare exceptions, the Republican Party only nominates someone for president who's already run for president before. And the only exception in the recent history was George W. Bush, and there I think there was it was an anomaly because of his father. Right. Okay. It's very, very unlikely at the end of the day that the Republican nominating electorate is going to nominate someone who's never run for president before. And
but they nominate that person the first time before they've run for president. I mean, they nominated someone the first time before they run. You have to run the first time once, right?
Well, no, but a successful nominee.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so you have to be tested in order to get the formal
Ronald
nod.
Reagan ran in '76. He tried in '68. Richard Nixon, we know, ran for president, lost, came back in '68. Everyone thought he was washed up. George H.W. Bush ran in 1980 for president, was unsuccessful. Bob Dole had run before and was nominated in '96. John McCain had run before. So this is not unusual. This is, frankly, I think that if you look at this just from a historical perspective, Romney has the best shot of being nominated.
Okay, so unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but are you in favor of Romney at this point?
I haven't declared who I'm in favor of at this point. But I think one thing I tell folks, look, if you want to participate in the Republican process in New York, you have to enroll in the Republican Party by October 14th of this year, because that's what in order to vote in the primary next year, you have to do that. And I think it's great. If Governor Christie comes in, I think it's terrific if he comes in, because his voice is an important one. He's been successful in New Jersey. Whether he wants to risk it all right now running for president at this point when it's a highly difficult game to get into, and he has got to run for re-election in New Jersey in 2013.
But and we're going to leave it right here, though. I just want to point out, by your formulation, he should, because then when 2016 rolls around, he might have a better shot. Just saying.
That's historical precedent would suggest that.
Fascinating. All right, John Faso, obviously, I want to thank you very much. You know much more about Republican politics than I do, so thank you so much for being here. Not difficult, obviously.